Hi there. Hello. I'm Clifford Bates, and this is reading Machiavelli's Discourses, right? This is about the Discourses. Today we're continuing our examination or going through Book 1 of the Discourses. Today we're looking at Chapter 19. Basically the title of Chapter 19 is After an Excellent Prince, a weak prince can maintain himself. But after a weak one, no kingdom can be maintained by another weak one. So therefore the question of what happens, you have a king. You have a king, in other words, you have a good king, an excellent prince, and then the successor is a weak one. The republic can be maintained, the state can be maintained. But what happens if you have one weak one after another weak one? Okay, then but after a weak one, no kingdom can be maintained. Right? He says that in that line. So let's continue this. Having considered the virtue and the mode of proceeding of Romulus, Numa, and Tullus, the first three Roman kings, one sees that Rome chanced upon very great fortune when it had the first king very fierce and bellicose, next quiet and religious, and the third similarly ferocious to Romulus, but more a lover of war than for peace. So therefore, this is the three kings, and for in Rome it was necessary that in its first beginnings, in order for a civil way of life emerge. But it was necessary, it was indeed then necessary, that the other kings take up again the virtue of Romulus. Otherwise the city would have become effeminate and prey for its neighbors. So therefore it just became religious and directed and it had to get armed so it would not be a prey, right? This is why the third king, Tullus, was like Romulus, didn't go down Numa's religious piece. In other words, Numa was what? Numa was quiet and religious, and therefore became more. You need to become bellicose so that it wouldn't be prey for its neighbors, right? Hence, one can note that a successor of not so much virtue as the first can maintain a state through the virtue of him who set it straight, and can enjoy the labors of the first. In other words, I'm not that great, I'm not that virtuous, but if the person before me was virtuous, I can sustain things from his virtue. Okay? Labors of the first. But if it happens either that he has a long life, or that after him another does not emerge to resume the virtue of the first, the kingdom of necessity comes to ruin. So therefore, in other words, what happens if I'm not virtuous, and I come after the first who was virtuous? First problem, what happens if my life is extraordinarily long? Now, if my life is normal, the system can survive. In other words, I can benefit from it. But if I live too long, and people forget, and the memory of what was the strong leaders, and the habits of what the strong leader did have been lost or eroded, then that's one danger. The other danger is where someone who comes after me is equally weak. Okay, and therefore what happens is that, oh my God, things are lost, right? Come to ruin. The next leader does not resume the virtues of the earlier leader. So on the contrary, if two, one after the other, are of great virtue, one often sees that they do very great things, and that the fame and that with fame they rise up to heaven. In other words, the two great men, this guy and this guy with great virtue, the esteem of the city, they do great things. So let's go here next paragraph. David was without doubt a man of very excellent arms, in learning and judgment, and so much was his virtue that when he conquered and beaten all his neighbors, he left to his son Solomon a peaceful kingdom, which he was able to preserve with the art of peace and not with war, and he was able to enjoy. In other words, David was successful. He was virtuous. He was like this. This is the Jewish example. This is the Old Testament biblical example. And Solomon was able to enjoy the peace and the things of the first thing. Now that is not a paragraph break. It's that he was able to enjoy happily the virtue of his father. But indeed, he could not leave it to his son Rehoboam, who had to labor to be heir to a sixth part of his kingdom, since he was not like his grandfather in virtue, nor like his father with fortune. Right? This is that. This is. First Kings 12, verse 17, and then circles 12 to 21. Chronicles, that's David. This is the story of David to transition to Solomon, and Second Chronicles 10 to 17's rebirth, where it is said that Rehoboam inherit only a twelfth of David's kingdom. So therefore he was not like his father with fortune, uniting the whole of things, but a good father, a strong leader, in other words. As he was more a lover of peace than of war, Benazet, Sultan of the Turks, was able to enjoy the labors of his father Muhammad, who, having, like David, beaten his neighbors, left him a steady kingdom, and one that he could easily preserve with the art of peace. So now it's interesting. His first in this paragraph 2, he starts with the Jews, and then Mohammedans, right? The Mohammedan or the Turk, right? He goes. He talks about the Sultan of the Turk, Bezat, who inherited his kingdom. He was peaceful, Muhammad, who was warlike and created the thing. And if his son Selim, the present Lord, had been like his father, and not his grandfather, that kingdom would be ruined. But one sees that he is about to surpass the glory of his grandfather. In other words, his virtuous excellence. I say, therefore, with the examples, that of an excellent prince, a weak prince can maintain himself. But after a weak one, no kingdom can be maintained with another weak one, unless, indeed, it is like that of France, which its ancient orders maintain. In other words, again, this leads us to the story about the prince, about the two different things. The Sultanate, the Turk, the Persian Empire. This is the question of why did the kings of Alexander? Why did Alexander's chapter? Chapter 4, right? And the idea is that the idea of France is able to maintain it because it's not the political rulers of the Turk, of Alexandria, of Darius are what? This was the idea that they were centralized and whole, and it was very difficult to do it, and therefore it was very difficult. It was easy. It was very difficult to conquer, but easy to maintain. The the French was it was easy to conquer because there was always outside, because it was decentralized. Certain provinces or certain dukes could bring in outside forces and they could come in, but it was difficult because it was so divided. It was difficult to maintain, right? So therefore, the question here is France, that like France, which its ancient orders maintain. Those princes are weak who do not rely on war. So therefore, this is interesting. He makes a reference here to France that is very interesting. The French are an example where weak kings can maintain themselves, and they can only do so because of the ancient orders maintain France. I conclude, therefore, with this discourse, that the virtuous are so. Therefore, it's okay. Let's keep this in mind. This is a point where this little clause is a hidden time bomb. Okay. The example of France is thrown in and it doesn't really explained, but maybe this is important. Why is France so important? I conclude that let's look at paragraph 3. I conclude, therefore, with this discourse that the virtue of Romulus was so much that it could give space to Numa's Pompeius to enable him to rule Rome for many years with the art of peace. But after him succeeded Tullus, who, with his great ferocity, regained the reputation of Romulus. And after him came Niccolò, gifted by nature in a mode that enabled him to use peace and endure war. First he set out wanting to hold the way of peace, but once he recognized that his neighbors esteemed him little, judging him effeminate. So he thought that if he wished to maintain Rome, he needed to turn to war and to be like Romulus and Numa. So therefore, in other words, Annos and Niccolò, well, okay, he wanted to, he knew how to be peaceful. He wanted to be peaceful, but when he realized that this was going to be bad because the neighbors didn't fear him, didn't esteem him, right, and looked at him, judging him as feminine, and if he was going to, he decided that if he was going to do this, he needed to turn to war like Romulus and not stay like Numa. Okay, so 4. From this, all princes who hold a state may find examples. So therefore, from everything he's talked about here, that a prince who holds a state needs to find an example. The question is, when is it turned? The thing here tends to be what virtue. In other words, peace, virtue, warlike. The virtue seems to be the equating of virtue seems to be warlike here. Warlikeness seems to be the virtue, and that's because all the examples follow about the warlike and able to maintain their strength and maintain their power. But it also has the question of religious. The other one is peace-loving and religious, right? Whereas the hard and warlike, aggressive. So therefore, this is an interesting ending in that situation, right? From all this, princes who hold a state may find example. For he who is like Numa will hold it, or not hold it, as the times or the fortunes turn under him. But he who is like Romulus, and like him comes armed with prudence and with all arms, will hold it in every mold, unless it is taken by him by an obstinate and excessive force. This reminds us the famous example of this use of this idea of an obstinate and excessive force. This reminds us of the Prince, where he talks about the Machiavelli, and there talks about the hereditary prince, right? The hereditary prince would always maintain it unless it is a extraordinary outside force. And there he seems to be talking about, the example of this was, I think, about what happened with, why did, was it the Kingdom of Milan, or the French king, and the mistakes the French king made, right? So therefore, what he says, if it's, in other words, the time under him, in other words, Numo holds it or not holds it, as the times or fortune turns on it. So the conditions are right. If the conditions are right, you can have peace. But if the conditions aren't right, and if you remain peaceful, then it might turn disaster. As the example of Anarchus in the previous chapter indicates, right? He wanted to rule peacefully, but the situations were not. If he maintained the policy of peacefulness or the behavior of peacefulness, he would have been suffered. So he was able to be warlike to ensure that the city survived. But he who is like Romulus and like him comes armed with prudence, and arms will hold it in every mode unless it taken. Again, this is the idea of the hereditary prince, right? That you can take it unless there's some obstinate or excessive force, or something greater than him in that sense. And surely one can estimate that if Rome had chanced upon a man for its third king whom did not know how to give back its reputation with arms, it would never, or only with the greatest difficulty, had been able to stand on its feet later, or to produce the effect it produced. In other words, if the third king that came was not able to be returned to the virtue, the virtue of the first one, the strong one, then it would not have been able to maintain itself, or would have only done so with what it says, stand on in other words, with great difficulty, the greatest difficulty, right? So while it lived under the kings, it bore the dangers of being ruined under a king either weak or malevolent. There was the danger of a malevolent king, weak or malevolent king. Therefore, the question is, if a malevolent king, then the next king comes is equally weak and malevolent, then you're in trouble, right? Okay, this is how we're going to end this. We're going to end it. Put your comments or questions or concerns here. Put your questions or things that you want to raise and issues that you want to raise in regard to this. Please put them here, and I'll respond to them when I see them. If you like it, hit like button. Please hit like button because it helps the channel. Share the video on your social media. Share it far and wide. Again, this helps the algorithm. If you've not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Encourage your friends to come check the channel out and subscribe. Another thing you can do is, well, if you didn't like it, you can always thumbs down, but say why in the comments. This will also help the algorithm. As well as, if you say no, you don't like it, but say why in the comments so that people can learn, okay? They get some benefit from it. It's not, I don't want to be it's like this. You can, if you want to follow me on social media, the social media links are below. If you want to know more about me as a researcher and a scholar and find out my scholarship, you can see the academic social media below the social media. And if you want to help me do what I do here, you can do so by being a member, by contributing, through subscribe to our Patreon, and donate that way. Or you can buy one of my books are currently available through either Amazon, through your local publisher, online distributor, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Libris, Book Depository, whatever, or through the publisher directly. So therefore, that's it. We will turn to chapter 20 next. Take care and have a good day. Bye-bye.